and it's a pleasure to introduce Elena Fumagalli. She works at USE, Utrecht School of Economics, and she will speak on explaining women's well-being. The role of the reference group.
Yeah, okay, thank you for inviting me. So apparently there are also some social scientists around, not just in the city center of the conference, but one is me. I was discussing before that Fumagalli is a very common surname, but in this case it's also very common because Elena Fumagalli is my twin sister. So we have this kind of, some project together, and we saw that it works well, and then we kicked over. So I want to just...
So that's your reference group?
Yeah, exactly. Yes. No, yeah, last time I was presenting this, I actually mentioned that she's actually my reference group. But then, yeah, the paper is about how similar to you your reference group is. So my sister is very similar. I'm mainly an applied econometrician. I also work in network theory. I mainly do games on network, but this one is more just applied. So, what's the problem here? The idea is in the last, 100 years, there have been like many good changes for women. Voting rights, even in Switzerland they can vote since the 90s. And on the labor market, and then you imagine, okay, great, all these women now, they're very happy. Apparently, like checking the well-being of women, the well-being went either stable or went down compared to the men. So, I mean, if they went up, but then the women went up less than the men. So, so you imagine that you think that, okay, the kind of women are catching up, but not really in terms of well-being. So the idea was, why is it the case? Well, we had in social science, known as sociology and economics, we had three different ideas. One is because women have more tasks, so inside and outside the household, so you have to do two things. It's very stressful, so you're kind of sad. And then the second one is that, women, they just have like more unpleasant tasks. And the third one is that, okay, before I was saying, okay, I'm a housewife, I'm fine, everybody's a housewife, is how it's supposed to be. Now I see Obama, and I say, I would like to be Obama as well. So my reference group changed, and I want to be like Obama, and then I say, okay, I catch up, but not enough to be like as good as the men. So I get kind of depressed, so like my subjective well-being doesn't go.
Well, the fourth reason could be that the men are so happy to have women closer to them that they take off.
Yeah, actually. Okay.
Yeah, indeed, they're more interesting women.
Okay.
What was the story with the unpleasant tasks? Is it about household tasks or?
Yeah.
Not actual jobs, because I thought there was.
No household tasks.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, for example, they have leisure, but then they have like less leisure and then more fun, for example. So our idea was, okay, we just want to test this idea, whether people compare, women compare themselves more to men.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, also it's yeah.
How do you exactly define subjective well-being? Do you just ask women how happy are you with your life?
Yeah. We have like 4 questions. I say, how happy are you with your life in general, with your health, with your income, and with your leisure. Also to men, just to see how they react.
Could it be more social pressure for women to underreport themselves, to say that they're less happy than they really are? That could be like a forward.
Yeah, could be. Yeah. But why more than men?
There's a lot of political debate about like the role of women right now, and it's very good to say that, as a society as a whole, for women to say that it's not going well with them.
Yeah, okay.
Right? If you want to improve your rights, it's better to say you're not doing well.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, anyway,
But
let's
then you
continue.
don't have to say that you're unhappy anyway.
But it's also kind of known that men kind of overestimate their well-being or something.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I'm not saying that
But this is
it's
changed.
subjective well-being.
Subject.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, let's
It's a hot
continue.
topic.
So, yeah.
So I just wanted to know what
I suggest we listen to the talk and then discuss.
the span of time. The span of time that you said that they discovered that it was going down from where. So what was the time span that they observed? Is that
No, well, it was like mainly a paper in for the States, but then yeah, it depends by country.
no? Okay, but I mean, did they start measuring this in 1950 or 1920?
No, probably like in, I don't know, 60 books, for example. So our idea is, okay, what we can do, we make the reference group explicit. So we divide the group in two groups. One we make the reference group explicit, the other one we don't mention it, and then we see how they report the subjective well-being. So we have two groups, one is unconstrained and the other one is constrained. So we have a randomized controlled trial on a representative sample in the UK. So what they have this, the ex-British household panel, now it's called Understanding Society, it's a longitudinal survey with like a lot of observation. What they do, you can run experiment from time to time, and then you can ask new question or you can reframe the question to see how the answer change. So, yeah, as I mentioned before, we have like 4 domains: health, income, leisure, and life overall. So we see how the female react to the treatment, how the male react to the treatment. What I wanted to talk about more is about the fact that the way we ask the question changes the cognitive burden of the question. Because then if you compare to other people, then the question becomes like more difficult, so you could reply to the question a different way, not just because of the reference group, but also because you can get confused a little bit. So we try to clean this part. So, well, it's just, we use this data, which is the innovation panel for Understanding Society, and it's the fifth wave collected in 2012, and we want to go in 2011. So we had 2 questions. One question is the treatment, which is how dissatisfied are you with your health, for example, or income, if you compare yourself with other women, for women, and if you compare yourself with other men, for men. While the standard question is the standard question that you get in like many surveys of this kind of on the subjective well-being, which is how dissatisfied or satisfied are you with your life domain. So yeah, we can see that the difference between the 2 questions, yes, this doesn't work, is the comparison, and then this is also kind of longer, so more difficult. And then you can have like 7 different answers. 3 are dissatisfied with different kind of level of dissatisfaction, and 1 is kind of neutral, and then you have 3 satisfied. So what do we expect? Well, we expect that if there is a gap, a clear gap, for example, income gap between men and women, and then if women are more disadvantaged than men, then if I compare myself to Obama, then I say, well, I'm not very happy. While if I compare myself to other housewives in the south of Italy, I say, well, I'm actually okay. So if you restrict your ex-ante reference group to women, then I should report a higher satisfaction. For income, it makes sense because they say, okay, it's at least people perceive that the gap in income is big and in favor of men. For other domains, it's not that clear because it's not very clear to see whether men are healthier than women. Probably they are kind of healthier, but they die earlier. It's not clear whether the leisure of men is better than women, so they have like less children-related stuff, but probably they have less leisure, for example. So the gap in income is pretty clear. The gap in other domain like leisure and health is not very clear. We still think that there is a kind of a gap in favor of men also in leisure and a little bit smaller in health. Then it's also the perceived gap. So if actually women are healthier than men, but they perceive to be less healthy than men, then of course the gap is the other way around. For life overall, well, we have this variable, but then there is just too much going on. So, well, these are the results. What we did, we collapsed all the dissatisfied together, all the satisfied together, so we have just 3 possible answers. They are dissatisfied, neutral, and satisfied. And then these are these 4 measures. And then income is what we expect. So basically here, so the coefficient are the coefficient for the treated people. So if you have been exposed to the question that is compare yourself to women if you're a woman, or compare yourself to men, then you actually report these are the triangle are women and the square are men. Then you report less dissatisfaction, so you're happy, so you have a lower probability to say that you are dissatisfied, and then you report more satisfaction, then they're statistically significant. While for men, it's like either flat, if anything, the treatment decreased their satisfaction, because they say, okay, before they were comparing themselves also to the housewife, and it's okay, great, but then now they just compare themselves to men. Yeah.
Oh, so am I reading these right? So the dotted line is like unchanged, and then if the dot is moved to to the right, that means it got lower, and if it's to the left, it got bigger.
So here, I mean, these are the 3 possible answers. So here means that you have more positive answer for men and less negative answer. So less dissatisfaction and more satisfaction.
Got it. Okay.
And here basically flat, or if anything, less satisfaction and more dissatisfaction. We have 2 different estimators, because we say, well, we have an order probability. They say, okay, you have 3 different outcomes and are ordered, or we say, okay, they can also be that they are not ordered. So we say, okay, we run also a multinomial probability. The reason why we think it's not ordered is because of the cognitive burden. So this is very clear. This is too much going on. This is leisure. If anything, the women are more satisfied. So you have a positive effect of the treatment on the reported subjective well-being of women. And for men, it's pretty flat. And then for her, there is something strange going on. So we see that. Okay, if we consider the 3 outcomes as ordered, then it's pretty flat. But then if we allow the outcome to be unrelated, then there is for women this neutral that pops out. So it's not close to 0 anymore. So we think, okay, what is the case here? And then we thought, well, probably the case is that people get confused and say, okay, they ask me a question which is about health. So if they ask me, how is your cardiological health, I can say, if say health, well, I don't know, I have bad teeth, but good feet, and so I don't know how to put them together. And then if they ask me to compare to other women, then it's even more confusing. So we think that there is a cognitive burden going on. So
this only happened to women, not to men? No, because you mentioned...
Yeah. Well, it's a little bit to men as well, but for women it's more important. But then for some reason we see that women go more to the middle. We don't have a cause explanation. Okay.
Sorry, this horizontal axis, what are the numbers that you have there? Like,
so these are the numbers.
In terms of percentage.
Okay. Well, they're the same.
Because I see there's a 2 there, but a 0.2 is it?
0.2.
Okay, and that's what does it mean?
Yeah, you have
20% of the answers, outside
the probability. This is a marginal effect at the mean, so it means that you increase the probability of 20%.
Thank you.
Box plots, right? Is it box plots or because I'm really also not seeing it.
What I'm doing instead of I have also the table. And instead of presenting the tables of the marginal effect, I just say, okay, present the coefficient with the standard errors.
Yeah.
So the problem was that, so we have this cognitive load problem. So what is this problem? We say, okay, we have 7 alternatives, and then you have the middle alternative. And then it could be that some of the middle answers are spurious. Why? Well, so the problem here is that if they're spurious for everybody, it's already a problem. If they're more spurious for the treated, then what the treatment captures is not exactly the treatment you want to have, but also something related to the cognitive burden. So we want to clean the treatment. So what we did was say, okay, why don't we estimate the treatment, the model in like 2 steps. In the first step, we take into consideration the cognitive burden, and in the second step, we really check the treatment. So something more about the cognitive load problem, you can have 2 different kind of spurious answer, and then this literature comes from the survey methodology literature. In one case, is satisfies. So, for example, if you ask me, how satisfied are you with the performance of Ajax in soccer this year? And I say, well, I don't care about soccer. You already interviewed me for 40 minutes. I don't know. But so I say, well, neither satisfied nor satisfied, because I don't have a clue. I don't care. I just want to go fast. But then if you say no, but then if you reply well, then I don't give you money, then I can think about it and say, well, actually I had some of my Italian friends were a little bit sad because after Juve, and then actually my Dutch friend were very happy, so probably I was doing well. So if I encourage, I give a directional answer. Or you can have hidden don't knows, which is something different. You say, if you ask me, for example, okay, what do you think about the economic policy of the Dutch government? And then I say, it's not that I don't care. I care because I'm an economist, and I feel the pressure of saying something. But I don't speak Dutch, so I feel bad that I don't know, because I haven't read enough. But I don't want to say I don't know, because then I signal that I really don't know. Or I want to hide this fact that I don't know. So I say, there are some things that are okay, things that are not okay. So I put it in the middle. But then it's not really a middle, it's that I have no clue. It's not that they're really indifferent between the two. And then these are 2 kind of spurious answer that we want to clean up. Well, there are like different ways to avoid this. You can do it from a survey point of view. So before running the survey, you can say, well, I just remove the neutral answer. Say, okay, are you satisfied or dissatisfied? And then if you're indifferent, well, your problem. I just want to know whether you are positive or negative. But then probably it's not a very good idea. Or you can do branching. You can first say whether you're satisfied or not satisfied, and then give you something more about how much you're satisfied. Or you can say, okay, if you are indifferent, then you can have follow-up questions. Or you can have, instead of Likert scale, you can have like different items. But then it's probably, increase the cognitive burden is even worse. So what we did, we say, okay, we try to model it statistically exposed. So we say, okay, there are like 2 data set generation processes. One is about whether I want to basically reply or not, or say I don't know, that is not a real don't know. And then once I pass the hurdle, then I really decide to say whether I'm indifferent or happy or not happy. And then we can estimate this with maximum likelihood. So, well, the advantage is that well, it's for free, and then it can be used, exposed for many questions. The disadvantage is very parametric, so a little bit old school, and then you need some exclusion restrictions. So this is what we have. We have two processes, one whether to say whether it's spurious or genuine, and then the other one, so what, either you say, okay, don't know, leave me alone, or you say, okay, now I think about it, and I really say, okay, what do I think about the IX, for example, and I say, okay, I analyze all the information I have, and I say, okay, I'm satisfied, for example. So you have two different kinds of neutral answer. The real one, I'm really indifferent, and then the other one that I'm not indifferent, but I want to cover for some reason. So, well, we can say, okay, you have two different processes, and then the other terms are normally distributed. We assume now that they are independent. You can also assume that they are dependent. In this case, the dependency between the two is not very clear. I mean, ex ante, I'm not sure whether if I'm tired, then I report more or less satisfaction. It could be the I'm tired, then I'm like more annoyed, and I say I'm very dissatisfied. Yeah.
So what I'm not getting is how you can separate these two modes in principle. So are you assuming that there's a consistency in the attitude of a person over different questions? Something like that? Because otherwise every question can be fitted
exactly. I mean,
in a degenerate way.
Well, it could also be, so, well, then I'm talking about the exclusion restriction. So statistically, okay, you have functional for that you can separate the two processes,
yes.
But then you can also try to have like some variables that affect one process more than the other. And then it's what you were mentioning. So one idea could be, as you say, some people they have more strong views than others.
Right.
Or some people are like, in general they have more strong views. So what you can do, you have like different questions, similar questions, so you can see whether people reported more don't know in similar questions. I mean, not just about subjective well-being, but also about whether women should stay home and clean the dishes, or I don't know, other stuff. So this is one possibility, and then the other possibility is that this is a data set in which you have different experiments. So people are exposed to different treatments. So it could be that if I've been asked like 40 questions or 400, then my willingness to answer the question is different. Okay, so this is actually what we did. Okay, this is what we did. We had like two kinds of exclusion restriction. One is exactly what you were mentioning, the number of neutral answers reporting other questions. So this is kind of a fixed effect of a person. They say, okay, I'm usually more willing to give neutral answer because I'm psychologically like this. And the other one is something about how incentivized are in my answers. We had like many experimental variation. One was the easiest possible, because one of the problems, the way to solve this problem is branching the question, and you have people who had branched questions, and then we thought that this was actually a good predictor of whether they had more neutral answer or not, and it was not. Then we had some experimental variation due to a mistake, because at some point there was a mistake in the algorithm that created the survey. So some people got, I don't know, some question less. So actually it was like shorter interview. And then this was another predictor. And then this is one of the experiment that there was in the survey, which is, well, they try to incentivize people to reply. Well, one of the experiments was I just give you money. And then this one, they receive a letter saying, I think there were two letters, this is the normal motivational letter saying, people like you usually reply. and then you feel the pressure. So okay, people like me usually apply, so you put some effort. Actually, there was another letter that was, if your reply is very good for the society, and then this was not very effective. But then this one was. So the idea is you have, so okay, this is the likelihood of a normal order probit, and what we have just a first hurdle in front. So the probability of actually being dissatisfied is passing the hurdle of actually saying, okay, I want to give a real answer, multiplied by the probability of giving a real answer. The same for dissatisfied, no, it's the opposite. This is the dissatisfied and dissatisfied. While the neutral answer, you have two different neutral. One is, okay, I decide to basically tell the truth, and I'm really indifferent, and then these other parties, okay, I just don't put enough effort, or is a hidden or don't know. I say neutral, and I go to the other question. So we applied this model just for health. Well, for two reasons, because we thought that the cognitive burden was more in health. It was applied to men. And then, because we saw that there was like a more difference between the order probit and the multinomial probit. And then what we get when we, say, clean the estimate from the cognitive burden, we see that actually the spurious neutral is very big. And then once we clean the estimation, then part of not being significant was due to this spurious neutral, and then you see that this is just the effect of the treatment on satisfaction. This is the effect of the treatment on giving more spurious answer, but this is the effect of the treatment on satisfaction. And then you can see that actually for women, then the treatment makes women more satisfied even when they report health. So then you see, because you have like a higher probability of people who say they're satisfied, and a lower probability of people who say they are dissatisfied. Okay, well, I think I finished. Yeah, so the idea was trying to see whether women were more satisfied or less satisfied when we've kind of forced them to compare the set to the same, to a reference group which was similar with respect to gender. And then, we saw that there was a potential attenuation effect due to the cognitive burden. And then we see that, well, for example, for health, that was the case, and then it was cleaned up using this middle inflated order probit. Yeah?
So now that you got these results for the health question, did you also apply your correction to the other questions to see whether those results are changing?
No. Do you want the real answer?
Well,
the real answer, okay. The problem is that we thought that this process was not there in the other case. Why? Because in this case, with the order probit, we impose ordinality of the data. While in the multinomial probit, we say, okay, we don't say anything, we have no assumption, then the three coefficient can go in the direction they want. And in this case, we see that these coefficients, these two coefficients are very different, while in this case, the estimate, like the black one and the white, were very similar. So we think that this cognitive burden was not there, which also means, from a practical point of view, that the estimator, it's more difficult for the estimator to separate the two processes, which means the model to converge.
Okay, but you can't use the model then to test that this really isn't giving a cognitive problem, to kind of have a null case.
Yeah, well, but this is if if the two processes are not very clear, then it's difficult to identify them.
Okay.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong, but I'm a physicist. In physics, you are not allowed to touch data, right? I mean, if you have data, you should never touch it. So I am a bit surprised. You should do a new experiment, right? I mean, you should keep the data as it is, but if you think it is not fair, or if it's somehow people have other things are going on, I think you should change your questionnaire and do a different experiment.
Yeah, exactly.
You can never touch the data, right?
Yeah, but here you don't touch. I mean,
Well, you're touching the data. You're manipulating the data.
no, but I mean, you run a different estimator. So, I mean, you know how you're manipulating the data.
Yeah, but your outcome is somehow unclear, right? Because you are assuming things that you should ask these people.
No, exactly.
If they feel if they are seriously answering the questions or not.
No, yeah, exactly.
Right?
I agree,
cannot
but
model
then
that.
so before, I mean, experiment cost. So before deciding to run another experiment, you say, okay, you run this, and they say, is it possible that we go in this direction? We think that this could be an explanation. Then, of course, it's not physics, so we all know that in social science things are a little bit more. So no, I mean, no, it's like this. I mean, you're thinking about like people making decisions, so they're not clear rules. So the way social science work, I say, okay, we do this, we go in this direction. We think, I mean, we don't say that this is really what's happening. We say this is compatible with this explanation, and then you can say, okay, the next step is actually running a new experiment and see whether the burden is there.
But you could have forgotten an argument, and you would have to reanalyze everything based on other arguments, and then maybe there's a completely different outcome. So the only way to do it correctly is to do a new experiment, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But then with a new
questionnaire.
To decide which experiment.
Exactly. The change of estimates it just means to determine the next step in the strategy, so to say.
I mean,
right?
I'm not saying that for sure there is cognitive burden, but then I'm saying, okay, I go to the person who set up the survey, and I say, okay, if you set up a question like this, perhaps there is something going on. Then you can decide to spend £5 million and then ask all questions like this, and then you get like noisy result. Or you can say, okay, I'm not sure that is exactly what's going on, but then perhaps it is the case. We run like a small experiment, for example, in another innovation panel, we see whether it's a problem, and then next time we see whether there's really a cognitive burden in these kind of questions. And then, yeah, for example, I don't know how long the question is, could be that it has an impact. In a sense, I mean, it's also good that at the beginning we thought that having this experimental variation was good, because, okay, then you can have an exclusion restriction. And then we say, well, perhaps like receiving payment really affects your answers. And then we didn't find much, and we say, oh no. But then it's good, because this is a survey with many experiments, and then you really don't want that each experiment has an effect on all the others. Mm-hmm. So in a sense, it's good that you have some kind of effect in some cases, but otherwise, if you have like all the experiment affecting each other, then you cannot find anything.
Other questions?